So we're going to call to order in a couple of minutes to respect everybody's time. And please feel free to keep getting pizza afterwards. I might ask somebody to call for a recess after the chancellor speaks so we can take a breath. Chancellor is only able to be here till 6, so we're going to get this show on the road. The QR code on screen. We would love if you put your questions in there, just so we can get a formulated list of questions to ask the chancellor, so we don't have to spend a lot of time with raising placards, because I know we don't really have tables today, so we don't really have placards unless you want to put it on the person's head in front of you. So thank y'all, and we're going to get started in a minute or so. But again, thank y'all for being here. We are going to go ahead and start the meeting. Do I hear a motion to start the meeting? Do I hear a second? Thank y'all. We are starting at 5:31. And I would like to introduce Chancellor Lee Roberts, and I would love to get a round of applause.
Use this or
whichever is easiest for you.
I have to use the microphone because of the. Thank you all for having me here. We have a number of other administrators here. Provost Chris Clemens, Vice Provost for Student Affairs, Amy Johnson, Aaron Bockenheimer from Student Affairs. Glad they're here with me. I've got until 6 o'clock, and so I'm going to speak briefly, but look forward to having plenty of time to answer questions. And the two topics I wanted to talk about briefly, and again, eager to hear what's on your minds, are initiatives that we have underway that I think have some relevance to graduate students, and then policy implications of the election. So 3 initiatives that I wanted to mention that I think have some relevance to grad students. The most salient one probably is the graduate student stipend, something that we'll spend quite a bit of time discussing. Katie Heath did a terrific presentation to the Board of Trustees at the last meeting a few weeks ago. I think the provost has more detail about where we are on that, but it's something that everybody is aware of. We're aware of where we are on the competitive data. We're aware that we're behind, and everyone is focused on it and eager to try to address it. We realize it's important and that we need to make strides on that front. Related to that is graduate student housing. So we have survey data that shows where graduate students live, how long they commute, how much they pay for housing. It confirms what all of you already know, which is that we have a problem with availability of housing for graduate students and for junior faculty here in Chapel Hill. I think for a long time, people have reassured themselves with the fact that the cost of living in Chapel Hill is lower than some other places that you could live, say Berkeley or Los Angeles. But first of all, that gap is narrowing. And secondly, in a lot of ways, that's not especially relevant. You're not in graduate school in those places. You have to figure out how to find affordable housing here. So we've spent some time talking to peer institutions, visiting peer institutions. We had a team recently at UC Irvine right before Christmas, which has done some innovative things around graduate student housing. I was in Austin earlier that month talking to them about a new project that they've built where in Austin, they've added 500 graduate student beds. Everyone knows what's happened to real estate in Austin. It's gotten remarkably expensive. So it used to be affordable for graduate students, much less so now. they've just added 500 student beds through a public-private partnership. And so we're exploring different options of adding graduate student housing. We will, over time, close the Beatty Hill student housing, but we're not going to do that until we have more options available online and ready to go. We're not going to decrease the amount of student housing available. The idea is to provide a net increase. And our facilities folks are working now with a number of private sector developers trying to come up with a game plan for adding graduate student housing via a public-private partnership, which would be the fastest way to get new housing out of the ground. Fastest still is not especially fast. You're talking about a real estate construction project. So you're talking a 2 to 3 year window before that housing is online, but at least we need to start the process, which we've done. Related to that is the rec center and the student wellness facilities. We've heard quite a lot from students. The student body president, undergraduate student body president last year, Christopher Everett, led an effort to highlight the inadequacy of our student wellness and student rec facilities. I actually work out in the student rec facilities most days. I don't need anyone to tell me that they're overcrowded and outdated. And so we have already gotten Board of Trustees approval. We will get Board of Governors approval to raise the student activity fee very marginally. So at the end of a 4-year period, it will go up by a total of $250. It raises the total cost of attendance for undergraduates at the end of those 4 years of increases by about 1%. So that will fund a significant new investment in our student wellness and recreation facilities. We're talking about $120 million project. So doesn't buy as much as it used to, but it's still a very significant investment in improving and enlarging our student rec and student wellness facilities. Again, something that doesn't happen overnight, but probably still that 2 to 3 year time window. Just briefly on the election, I've gotten a lot of questions about the policy implications. I personally think that it's hard to believe the election was 4 weeks ago. It seems like longer, I think, to a lot of people, but it's a little early to begin forecasting particular policy implications, and certainly to begin complying with policy that has not yet been promulgated. So at the faculty council meeting before Thanksgiving, the chair of the faculty, Beth Morocco, urged the faculty to avoid what she called anticipatory compliance. And I thought that was a good phrase, because I've heard a lot from faculty and others trying to guess what policy implications are going to be and how they should react. And I think that's unwise. I think it's important to wait until policy is actually put in place before reacting. That doesn't mean that we don't try to influence policy, which we do in a couple of major areas. So if the Secretary of Education were asking me what the Department of Education could do for Carolina, and to be clear, nobody has asked me that, although the first 2 of these 3 things that I'm going to mention, I did relay to the outgoing Secretary of Education over the summer. I'd say the following 3 things. One is that the Department of Education administers the Federal Financial Aid Program, the FAFSA program. In an effort to upgrade and improve that process, it was badly botched. There's broad bipartisan consensus that the FAFSA upgrade was botched. Our head of enrollment testified in front of Congress to that effect. We delayed our undergraduate enrollment deadline twice to account for the problems with FAFSA. Our peer institutions did the same. We've been told by the Department of Education, the outgoing Department of Education, that they don't think they'll have the FAFSA process fixed for the current application cycle. And so addressing the problems with FAFSA would be high on our list of our wish list with the Department of Education. There's a gap in the interpretation of Title VI, Federal Civil Rights Statute, between what the Department of Justice views as our obligations and what the Department of Education views as our obligations. So the Department of Justice imposes a very clear requirement to protect free speech under the First Amendment on all college campuses. The Department of Education has made clear that they believe we have an affirmative Title VI obligation to make sure that there's not a hostile environment being created for any particular minority group. And this is not just a theoretical difference. There's a federal district court in Southern California that ruled this fall that UCLA had failed its affirmative Title VI obligation to prevent a hostile environment being created for Jewish students. And so clarifying that gap between the Department of Education's interpretation of Title VI and the Justice Department's interpretation of the First Amendment would be a helpful thing for us and for all universities. And then thirdly, the Department of Education also enforces Title IX as it relates to intercollegiate sports. And there's a significant gray area as to how Title IX affects the new world of name, image, and likeness payments to college athletes. There's just a lot of gray area around that. The only way to resolve that gray area is through guidance from the Department of Education. And so that would be a helpful thing for us and again for peer universities. The big focus of our, the primary focus, the number one focus of our federal relations efforts, and we have a federal relations team. The UNC system also has a federal relations team. We use third-party firms, policy advisory firms as well. Their priority is federal research funding, securing continued federal research funding for Carolina. We went over $1.2 billion in federal research funding this year. We depend significantly on federal research funding, and we want that number to continue to grow. And so, as I say, our primary lobbying focus in Washington is around the continued availability of federal research funding. But fortunately, and this is always a good thing when it comes to lobbying, we're not alone in that. So we're members of two important associations, the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, which is all public schools, and then importantly, the AAU, which is the top 70 research universities. The AAU's overriding lobbying effort, and they're based in Washington, is around continued increases in federal research funding. And so we'll continue to press for that through our own efforts, through the system's efforts, through the AAU and the APLU. And there's been a lot of discussion within the AAU since the election of the best way of continuing to advocate for not just sustained but increased federal research funding, and that'll continue to be a significant focus of our efforts. So I'm happy to answer questions about any of that or anything else that might be on your minds. The provost is here as well. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Chancellor. So I have a collection of questions here from representatives here tonight. I'm going to read the questions. I apologize if I pronounce your name incorrectly, and I'm going to try and paraphrase some of them. So our first question is from Senator Avery Baker in Public Policy. During the recent Board of Trustees meeting, Board Member Blaine criticized this body as acting as children in response to voting overwhelmingly in favor of the no confidence resolutions, and implied that this would jeopardize stipend increases. During the last Senate meeting, President Heath told us that board members told her after the meeting that they disagreed with Blaine's statement. Do you agree with Blaine's statements? Do you find them productive? And will that impact your decisions on making stipend increases and livable wages based on those resolutions?
So I don't speak for the Board of Trustees and vice versa. I don't report to the Board of Trustees. I report to the system president. I will just say I don't see those. I can understand why he said that, but we don't see those as linked. We're working hard on the graduate stipends, as I say. We think it's important. It's a priority for us, and we're going to do our best to achieve meaningful progress there.
Our next question comes from Jacob Ginn, who's a senator for sociology. UNC. Well, I was just going to read them for brevity's sake. UNC has provided a path for every student who was suspended in May to come back to UNC and finish their studies. The one exception is Caleb White, an undergraduate Jewish student. You claim that UNC wants to protect Jewish students, but you are clearly targeting Caleb and not providing him with equal treatment. Does UNC's commitment to protect Jewish students not extend to anti-Zionist Jewish students?
I really can't talk about an individual. I mean, I'm looking at Amy Johnson. I don't think I can talk about any individual student disciplinary case.
What about just general?
Generally what? Yeah, of course. The disciplinary process applies equally to everybody. It's viewpoint neutral. I can't talk about the specific case. Head of Student Affairs is here.
There are privacy laws and we have university confidentiality.
Okay, our next question is from Catherine McCormick, representative from Political Science. Like many others here, I would like to know when stipends will be raised.
So I talked vaguely about the stipends. I know the provost has been more deeply involved, so I'll turn it over to him to talk specifically about it. I wanted to make sure he was here specifically for this reason.
Yeah, so what I've asked for at this point from various folks, including the Dean of the Graduate School, the Vice Chancellor for Research, is a more than 1 year schedule. So when I came in as provost, this minimum stipend had not been raised. I advocated that it go up by a substantial amount in 1 year. You had a great advocate here at that time who presented data that helped a lot with that. Then we had a year where we just matched the raise that was given to faculty. So it was a much smaller increase in the second year. So what I've asked is that we get on a schedule to raise it substantially at least 3 years in a row. And I've given a target for where I want to get to and a timetable, but I've asked the impact. The reason I'm waiting on feedback is if you're paid on a research grant and the budget has your current salary, there has to be a rebudgeting, and some people can't do that. So there's a bit of a time lag in how fast research-funded stipends can go up. And then I'm not going to fund centrally, because I don't have the money, the raise in the minimum stipend. So for those departments where the minimum stipend, where they're at the minimum stipend, this will be a substantial series of increases. They're going to have to manage their budget under the new budget model, and I want to give them a chance to model that out and tell me what the impact is. And I'll tell you what some of the impacts might be, to be in all frankness. This is happening at other universities. As we try to match other universities, especially union universities, they've had to cut the enrollments to decrease the numbers to generate the funds. Boston University in particular canceled enrollments in at least 3 departments for this year. Yeah. And so we'd rather not do that. We'd rather be able to manage that. But one possibility is folks say, well, the size of our graduate program could be a little smaller. We could pay everyone more. We can also try to find funds from other sources. And there are people interested in funding this, especially private donors, because we have a lot of donors who respect what grad students do. The other thing is we have a rule that's not enforced right now that you don't get support after 5 years. It's in the graduate student handbook. You can read that. We've been very generous around that for lots of reasons. We could begin to taper stipends for people who've been graduate students a long time. I did this when I was chair of physics in a gentle way, and it allowed us to raise stipends at that time. So I want feedback, though, from deans, chairs, before I announce a plan. Now, it is my authority to set that minimum. So I'm the person who can do it. It's been delegated to me. I have a target in mind. I'm not going to say what it is until it's been vetted, but I don't want to do it 1 year. I want to have a commitment where we get on a schedule for at least 3 years and we know where we're going to be. But you've seen the numbers that Katie presented, and I would like us to be in a much better situation with respect to our peers. So you can sort of figure out where one has to be. Who do I think are our peers? In the public space, UVA, Michigan, those universities. We may not get to above parity, but I'd like to get to parity with some of those peers. And I've asked, how can we do that? So I'm happy to take any follow-up. But
building on this about you given me this opportunity. So UNC state employees have a yearly increase to their salary. Over the last few years, we've seen how inflation has really affected our ability to purchase. Our purchasing power has been negatively impacted by inflation. Many other countries currently or tend to have a yearly increase to salaries based on that. How viable or possible do you see for there to be beyond an increase to the minimum stipends, also the possibility of there just being a minimum yearly increase to stipends based either on inflation or the consumer price index, kind of as we see with state employees?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Because that, to be clear, that minimum stipend change that I have authority over is not the final authority for raises for other graduate students. Schools can raise that or not as they are able to do so. And I don't really mandate that part of the raise. So I've talked to Beth Meyer Davis. The way it works for faculty and staff in much of UNC, not all, is there's something called an annual raise process. The legislature puts it into the budget and funds. Last time it was 3%, but that does not include graduate students. And that's a legislative action. And so we don't get funding for grad student raises. So I've asked Beth, can we find a way and get on a process where we at least match that ARP so that the grad students are getting, and that's what we did last year. We matched the raise that the campus got with our own funds. Now, there's a problem there, which is we are enrollment funded. We get our money from appropriations based on hours, and we get our money from tuition based on hours. That does not increase unless we raise tuition or they raise the appropriation, which has not happened. It's been flat. So the money has to come from squeezing existing accounts and finding ways to do it. So it's not, I could mandate it, but it's not so easy to do. And so I think the will is there, and I've asked Beth to study the problem, but she hasn't announced that we're doing it because we'd be committing to something that's unfunded. So, but we would absolutely like to do that. So.
Okay, and so just so everyone's clear what's happening with the questions. I see the large grouping of questions here. There are several of them are within the same grouping of questions. Instead of asking them all in sequential order, as it would be just repeating the same topic, I'm trying to gather them in a large grouping of them, so this way we can discuss them as a whole. So the next question that we have is relating to, and I believe this comes from Senators Tucker, Senator Amar, and I'm sorry, Hashem, I know I'm probably mispronouncing that. Talking about UNC's divestment efforts from Israel. Can you discuss that further if you have any intention of, divesting from Israel or the military industrial complex other universities have? Can you speak further on that?
I'm not sure I know of many other universities that have. There might be one or two. In order to do that, a number of things that I don't think are the case would need to be the case. We would need to be convinced that the university should take a stand on one side or the other of the Gaza conflict. And there's a range of views about that conflict on this campus as there are around the country. Would have to be convinced that that using the endowment to divest from multinational companies that do business in 100 countries around the world, one of which happens to be Israel, would be an effective way of putting that pressure on Israel, and would need to control the governance of the endowment, which we don't, and would also need to believe that the endowment should be used for that kind of political signaling. So none of those factors are, none of those are the case in my mind.
Our next question is from Senator Margaret Hawk. Earlier this year, North Carolina Transitional and Clinical Services Institute lost most of its funding from the university. The institute supported more than 10 graduate students through research assistantships. Especially given the political climate for research in medicine and public health, How does your office plan to support the graduate student funding in public health going forward?
What was the name of the institute?
The North Carolina Transitional and Clinical Services Institute.
Glad the provost is here. That's not one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief because I know there are more questions. The premise of the question is not quite correct. The NC Tracks did not lose most of its funding from the university. That funding comes from two places. One straight from the med school and their return of F&A grant overheads. The other from a central pool. That central pool disappeared in my office. I had made a commitment when the grant was renewed to do 1 year of funding and then try to help them find the rest. After the year, that was in the letter I wrote, that funding went away. The way it was handled, was not within my control. It was not to my liking. But we are still working to figure out how to increase the match. But that grant produces less overhead than the matching funds we provide. And so the whole grant we're underwater on, and there just aren't sources of funds to continue a match that's larger than what the grant generates. We're still trying to do it. It's just a matter of finding the funding.
You might want to stay up for the next question on this one as well. Our next question is from Senator Sloan Markowitz, who represents the postdocs. It was recently announced that a raise in the minimum salary for postdocs from 46 to 61,000 a year would be revoked for the foreseeable future due to opposing court litigation. Many postdocs are frustrated. The raise was recommended by the NIH based on feedback from postdocs nationwide. There's nothing stopping UNC from instituting the new minimum regardless of pending litigation. Would you advocate to instate this raise to help postdocs job recruitment and retention?
I'm actually not the best person to answer this. The Office of Postdoctoral Affairs is in research. And so I've followed this, but I'm not in the driver's seat. For those who don't know what's going on, there was going to be an increase mandated, required. We were gearing up to figure out how to do it without the money, and how we were going to get the money was unknown when it was removed. And so we didn't go through the pain of finding the money. I would absolutely advocate for raises for postdocs on the same basis as I do for grad students, which is not just one of having a living wage. It's about being competitive. If we're going to be a competitive R1 university, we need to have wages that attract the best postdocs as well as the best grad students. It's a practical matter, so of course.
The next question comes from Senator Emma Wren. Do the efforts to improve stipends on the administration end include master's students or only PhD students?
I'll just answer here. I gave instructions for the minimum for PhD students as a target, but we would follow with something. It would be a different amount, but it would include that.
Okay, our next question comes from Senator Caitlin Homier from Mathematics. Can you share any information about the potential changes to graduate student health insurance that are currently being discussed?
I know nothing about it.
So for those who, okay, so for, okay. Okay, so for those who can't hear on Zoom, there's no information yet. They will send us information as they have it.
To be clear, I think we have two student affairs professionals, the provost and the chancellor, saying that we're unaware that any changes are being
Okay.
discussed. Doesn't mean they aren't, but it seems that I'd be interested in knowing more about that.
Change provider on the state health plan. I don't know which plan this is, but we changed to Aetna, and that may be the change.
It's not exclusive to Aetna, but the system is really involved in that. We can get you some follow-up information.
Okay. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure I get the text on this correctly. Okay, so our next question comes from Senator Kieran O'Reilly from Pharmacy. We appreciate you coming to speak with us today. What are your visions for Carolina for 2025, and how can graduate students play a role in that vision?
Yeah, I wish I had more time to answer that. I was told I had until 6 and I have another commitment, but I appreciate the question, and there's all kinds of things going on all the time at this university. When I think about the things that we're still going to be thinking about a year from now or 5 years from now, the big picture strategic initiatives, we set up working groups when I first started to update the strategic plan. We're in year 4 of a 5-year strategic plan. And rather than update it across the board, we thought we would bring more strategic focus to the plan by focusing on 4 areas. So that's applied physical sciences, building out our capabilities in engineering. We are not thought of generally as an engineering school, but we actually have, as some of you I'm sure know, about 170 faculty in engineering disciplines and really strong programs in applied physical sciences, biomedical engineering, data science, and environmental engineering. Very strong student demand for those programs, very strong employer demand for those students. So looking at, should we grow those programs or add to them? And if so, which ones? Artificial intelligence, possibly the most important technological development of our careers. We're a leading global R1 research university. What's our strategy around this massive new technological change? Should our research priorities be? And how can we use it operationally to make our enterprise run more effectively? Enrollment was the third focus, predominantly undergraduate enrollment. The state has grown very quickly, as everybody knows. Carolina has not grown very quickly. And so every year we enroll a decreasing percentage of North Carolina's high school graduates. Used to be around 5%, now about 3.5%. So if we don't do anything, as the state continues to grow and we stay the same size, that number will go down every year as it has the last several years. So looking at whether we should grow, by how much, over what period of time, what are the implications for our infrastructure? We were just talking about housing. Anyone who goes into Lenore Hall at lunchtime knows how crowded our dining facilities are already. Parking, faculty workload, the availability of gen ed classes and large lecture prerequisites. There are a lot of implications that flow from any conversation around enrollment. And then related to that is the physical master plan for our campus. So the master plan is really 3 facets. We have large scale capital projects, new construction. We always have new projects underway. Right now, we're building the new nursing school building. We're going to break ground on the translational research building, large lab facility. I mentioned the student recreation and wellness project. We have the Porthole Alley project, which is an extension of the Ackland Museum. So the large capital projects are expensive. They get the attention and they're easy for people to understand. Just as important, if not more so, are our repair and renovation needs. Everybody who goes to school here knows we've got significant maintenance needs across our campus. We always have more demand for our maintenance dollars than we have dollars available. So we need to have a really good protocol for prioritizing those necessarily scarce maintenance dollars, putting them to the best use. And then related to that is capacity utilization. How well do we use our existing facilities? We had a presentation about that to the joint cabinet meeting earlier today. How well do we use them, and can we use them better? How do you know if you need a new classroom building or a new parking deck if you don't know how well you're using your existing capacity? So getting better and smarter about that, which obviously relates back to AI. So in terms of graduate student involvement, would welcome graduate student involvement in all of those areas. The undergraduate enrollment one is probably a little bit less relevant, but the other 3 all have plenty of room for graduate student involvement. The most salient one is artificial intelligence. And it's not just what our research priorities are, and it's not just how we use it operationally, it's also how it gets deployed in the classroom, both to people who are studying computer science and data science disciplines. Are they going to stay ahead of the curve? But also people who are studying every other discipline that gets taught at this university. And I perceive, and you all would have a more accurate feel for this than I would, but I perceive that it's very much case by case now, that the use of artificial intelligence, varies widely depending on the individual professor, what the policies are, how it's incorporated into the syllabus. And at a minimum, I think it would behoove us to get to some minimum base level of usage of this technology. So I started my career in investment banking, and I was a young investment banker in the mid 1990s during the time of the Netscape IPO and the original internet boom. And there was this common phrase that got tossed around at the time, which was, in the future, we're not going to talk about internet companies because every company is going to be an internet company. And that turned out to be true. We don't really talk about internet companies now. There are software companies and there are search companies and companies whose business is facilitated by the internet, but we don't have an internet strategy per se here at Carolina now because the internet is suffused through everything we do. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. And I think everybody has a role to play in helping us figure that out. It's a significant challenge. So I'm sorry that I have to go now, but I'd love to come back and talk more about that topic or any other. So I really appreciate your having me. And again, I look forward to further conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Roberts, for
Chancellor.
coming, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you.
I was wondering if the chancellor would be willing to speak about the no confidence resolutions that our Senate passed.
I would be willing to talk about them. I mean, I think this meeting really came out of that. I said to the paper at the time that I'm always willing to talk to really anybody on this campus, including this group. And I wish the provost and I had had an opportunity to speak before the no confidence motions were passed, but I expressed an eagerness to come talk to this group after they were passed. And that's why I'm here. And I look forward to continuing to talk with this group as a group or to graduate students in a smaller group.
Thank you, Chancellor. However, we have requested dialogue specifically about the terms addressed in those no confidence resolutions and have not had the opportunity to talk with you at length about them.
I'm sorry that this is coming up now when I already said at the outset that I had to leave at a certain time, and I do have another commitment. I'm not in any way, if this had come up first, I'd be happy to spend the entire time talking about this, but I do have something
I
else.
hope that maybe we could reschedule at a future date so that we can have that conversation at length, because those issues are very important to the student body and to our constituents.
Be eager to come back anytime.
Andy, we're going to work with the chancellor's office, and thank you again. I would like to thank you all for coming. We greatly enjoyed this, and we're going to work with the chancellor's office to, since there's been such great interest, possibly talking next semester and answering more questions. Again, we are going to send all of our questions that have been answered and have not been answered to the chancellor's office and surrounding offices, so that all questions can be seen. I know there have been issues with paraphrasing, but due to time commitments, as the chancellor is very busy, and we're trying to do our best with the time given to us. Can I hear? Yes.
Just because we don't often have opportunities to speak directly with the chancellor, so in the future, I think that we would really appreciate it if we were given the chance to raise questions in our own words.
Yes, we will do our best. Again, will ask for more questions. Please email myself or Nick or fill out the form if your question has not been answered, and we will send those to the office. When I hear a motion to is there a desire for a motion for a recess for a couple minutes, or would we like to go straight into the rest of the meeting?
I personally would like to debrief on the way that went down. And are the other administrators still present, or are they leaving?
They can stay for a couple minutes. So
Hi, everybody. Aaron Bockenheimer. I serve as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Engagement.
Amy Johnson from Student Affairs.
So, we want to call for a short recess so that people can debrief with each other. in the audience, and then people can talk online. I could hear that motion in a second. If there is no desire, we can go straight into the rest of the meeting. Okay, I hear a motion. Is there a second? How long would you like the motion to recess? 5 minutes? Do I hear a second? Do I hear any objections? Seeing none, we're gonna recess until 6:15, and then we'll be right back here. Thank you all.
Did we confirm that the administrators will be staying even with the recess?
Yes, they can stay for a couple minutes, and we can work with getting you to ask questions back and forth to them. I can hand them a microphone and we can try to figure that one out. Does that work? Hey, thank you. I guess questions online.
Probably make something. Maybe helpful. Knows it. You're gonna do the same thing with Nick. We won't be
Right, exactly. I'm gonna talk about
It's
stipends.
about stipend and things that are more directed. Whereas we can speak about. Cool.
Sounds great. Oh, no, we're good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And the student affairs is still here. They wanted me to clarify, they cannot speak for the chancellor or for the provost, but if you would like to ask them questions about student affairs related questions, they are happy to answer them.
Oh, yeah, no, and you asked a question about stipends, I can't.
Yes, let's not speaking on behalf of it, just more speaking to, like, you asked me something about like. Sure.
No, no, I'm good.
Thank What's next? The program?
Yeah, sure. I'm not wondering about Joe's. Yeah.
I hear people say, things in life generally they mention their kids.
So, okay, all right, I'll do it. So you got undergrad here on
So it's like. So I was Carolina, I was like, there's been a lot of growth. So for all techniques, but yeah. Your lessons are really good place. Oh, I see. I think you're right. Yeah.
Left for 18 years and came back.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'll go sort of. Correct, yeah. Any idea? I have no, quite honestly. Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, no, I'm
Anything we can do for y'all? Vice President or contact Katie if she's not able to be here right now.
Yeah, but I think we're okay to say her.
What? They reset it. What's going on here?
Okay, is everybody able to hear me or do I need to talk, move this closer? Cool. How about now? Cool. I will just talk like this. So I wanted to thank everybody. We are going to reconvene. So as y'all can move back to your seats. We are going to go get this show on the road.
I know you're busy, so I know how to.
Good luck, Joshua Bakita. Good luck. Okay, is there any business for open forum? And I also am going to eventually need a motion to approve the agenda, which we should have done earlier, but I'm going to need a motion to approve the agenda, which we should have done earlier. Is there a second? Cool. So we're going to move into open forum. Is there anybody that would like to speak at open forum? If not, we can go ahead and move to the planned
William,
legislation.
there are hands on Zoom, so I think people do want to speak.
Okay, I will figure out how to see both of those. I need both computers. 1 second. Sorry, technical difficulties. Y'all can go back to going back to talking. I'll figure this out.
Is this the time we get?
Sure, if like, this is more of a time to like raise business for the Senate, but if you would like to, yeah, if you would like to make a motion to suspend the agenda and continue to ask questions. It was just a motion to approve it, but if we want to suspend the agenda, we can do that too, if I hear a motion. Seeing no motion to suspend the agenda, and nothing for open forum. This is the time, if you want to suspend the agenda, we can talk to student services. Cool, is there a second? Cool. And now we're just gonna have people raise their placards and I will give a microphone to, well, I will give a microphone to Nick. And I'm going to work on getting hands on Zoom.
Emma Wren, Linguistics. Before we start, can y'all sort of introduce yourselves and tell us what your capacities are so we don't ask you questions that you aren't qualified to answer?
Sure.
Hi, Amy Johnson, again, the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs.
And Aaron Bockenheimer, Associate Vice Chancellor in Student Affairs, Student Engagement. So it's a good point. We had indicated, but folks may not have heard. We're certainly happy to answer questions related to student affairs. And so there's 16 units in student affairs, many of whom work to support graduate and professional students, just as we do undergraduate students. But, you know, if there's particular questions, for example, like graduate student stipends, those would probably be outside the scope of what we'd be able to speak to, but we can certainly talk about things that fall within the scope of student affairs at the university. So outside the classroom, predominantly student life initiatives, programs, and departments.
Hi, I'm Kayla Mason. I'm from cell biology and physiology. Thank you guys for being here. You can tell me if this is something you guys know or not, but I heard the chancellor say that Beatty Hill is being closed. That was the first time I'd heard that before. Do you guys know why that's happening? And then this is kind of a follow-up question, but I know there's old graduate student housing there that's like completely trashed at this point. Do you guys know what is happening with any of that area of campus or like plans for that?
So Student Affairs has just a dotted line relationship to housing at this point. We are making some renovations as a part of the larger university campus plan to Beatty and considering the space there. The chancellor, I know, and I can't remember, I've heard him speak several times, so I can't remember exactly if he said this today, but graduate student housing certainly is one of the elements of the campus master plan that they're considering, how we can add additional beds for graduate students, graduate and professional students. So that I know that is a part of the plan. But any specific questions or concerns you have about Beatty, glad to take back to our housing colleagues and share additional information as would be helpful.
And I don't think there's a plan for Odom Village currently.
No, as a matter of fact, the buildings in Odom Village, as you may understand, are in pretty bad shape. And I think the university is looking to repurpose that space, but the demolition of those Odom Village buildings. We actually have some departments and resources there. The Carolina Veterans Resource Center is still in that building. So we're looking for other homes for those spaces. And ultimately, I believe this is also a part of the campus master plan deliberation as to what we might do with that land. You bet.
Who else has a question? Nobody else?
Was there, I thought I saw another question over here.
There's someone else, question over here?
Fair enough. If there's something we can take back, I'm glad to. So let me know if we can be a resource in any way.
Anyone on Zoom, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask.
Hey, could
Hello, Lauren Babinitz from Geography and Environment.
It's my favorite show. Me too. Did you watch it when you were a
Can we mute
kid?
that just so we can hear you?
What are you? What kind of energy?
Can someone mute their, everyone check mute your
if I
microphone
was
on Zoom?
Dana.
fire or water?
Dana, this is God. Mute your microphone. And it worked.
I believe hosts can manually mute
Yeah,
people if they
powerful.
need to.
Sorry.
All right, Lauren Babinitz from Geography and Environment.
Hi, Lauren.
I just wanted to speak on whether or not is the student code of conduct and the student justice system that was previously in place. I'm a first year PhD student, and I just wanted to speak on sorry.
No, you know what? I could stand up. That would make things easier. Why don't I do that?
I guess the dissolution of that student honor code and the student board of discipline seems to be a pretty fundamental shift
Mm.
from the previous sort of standards of the institution and into this sort of new world. If I could hear a little bit more like of the internal reasoning why something like that might happen, and if that is like functionally permanent, if it's ever going to come back to an open forum or be decided on again anytime soon, just to hear a little bit more about the internal perspective.
Sure. So this is a big topic and I could talk about this for a week. So I'll try in the interest of letting other people in to ask any questions to be brief. Indeed, we did make a shift from a largely student-directed process to a process that follows a hearing board model, which I've worked in the field of student affairs for about 30 years, is the most common model of student conduct across the country. To our knowledge, we were one of only 2 schools, one of which is the other of which is very different than Carolina, who still were pursuing an honor court model. We did so for an array of reasons. While the honor court that we had reflects a great history and tradition at Carolina of student leadership experience, one of the things that we had increasingly observed is that while a great leadership experience, we were hearing very frequently from students who went through the process that it was very frustrating, it was long. We were running somewhere in the order of 100 to 140 days to conclude a case from beginning to end, which if you're doing the math, that can be more than a semester. It was getting in the way of students' academic progress to degree. And it was a really challenging process. It was affecting their mental health and an array of other issues. And while we wanted to maintain the student leadership piece of that in many ways, which I think we have, we felt that it was important to transition to better support the students who are going through the process. It's also important to note that that was a system that had existed for all intents and purposes in that model for more than 100 years. And the universe of higher education student conduct has changed. We now have way more federal regulations and guidance that we have to follow. We have the involvement of attorneys in a way that we didn't used to have. And we have far more intersection with civic and other sort of violations, all of which has made this process really complicated, nuanced, and we ultimately made a decision that we needed to have the process be directed by professional staff who could ensure that this process moved along in a really timely fashion. At the end of the day, we don't blame at all the students who are involved in this process. They're students first. And we certainly understand if they had academics and other things that impinged on their ability to resolve these cases quickly. We completely, as student development folks, we appreciate that and support it. But the problem was, again, for the students who were going through the process, it was taking too long. It was becoming really cumbersome. And we have since switched to this model of a hearing board model. It is, this is entirely at the discretion of the chancellor. This is Board of Governors and system policy that delegates the decision-making for student conduct to the chancellors of the various institutions. So after a lot of thought and deliberation, and by the way, this is a discussion that long preceded Chancellor Roberts. When Chancellor Kevin Guskowitz was here, it was an early conversation that he had with me, concerns related to this. Chancellor Holden Thorpe, I think, has come out publicly and said that he wishes he had made this change some time ago. So this was a long discussion about, are we supporting students through the conduct process in the best way that we could? Conduct processes are now on average taking somewhere in the order of 10 to 20 days to complete, much more expedited process. And also we have added some new features to the process that weren't previously available. So if you were a student who was found responsible or identified as someone having committed an alleged violation of the honor code, you could not say, you know what, I accept responsibility for this. I don't need to go through a hearing. I just want to go right to the end and resolve this quickly. That option was not available to you through the former conduct code. We now do have informal resolution processes where that that is a choice that students can make. Two students who are involved in a case can define a mutually informal resolution if they would like to, and we can move right to the final stages. So we think that ultimately this will be a process that is much fair, much simpler and easier for students to navigate, and much more timely in terms of their progress to degree. So for all those reasons quickly, and some others that I didn't mention today, that was the reason that we made that choice. It's really important to note that in a hearing board model, students are still actively involved. Students will still be participating in hearing board roles. They will still serve as advisors to students going through the case. And we have a we have an advisory committee on which students will sit. So don't let anybody tell you that students won't be in this process. It is a really important piece for us that students are still actively involved. There are some schools who have entirely administratively managed process. That was something that I think all of us in student affairs and my colleagues more broadly across the university felt like wasn't for us. It's important, I think, that students have the ability to say to their colleagues, this either does conform to our university values and rules or it does not. That is a very, very powerful message from your colleagues. And we still wanted students actively involved, and they will be in those roles. So hopefully that was a relatively quick answer to the question. Sorry.
So I have a follow-up on that. I'm
Yes,
Nick
please.
Pelosi, Health Policy and Management. The question that I have regarding this is that I was involved in the summer governance of the Graduate Student Senate here, and I worked closely with the President Heath's administration. This announcement came to us, felt like it came very rapidly, where we only had a few days to respond to this. And if this was something that was being worked on from Chancellor Guskowitz to the current chancellor, I'm curious to know why wasn't the Graduate Student Senate made more aware of this, so this way we could have input into this. And then my second question on that is, whilst I appreciate the expediency of going through these processes, my question is what level of accountability is there? I understand what you're saying, that you have a student, advisory committee on this, but what level of accountability is there of that student advisory committee? And then I specifically relate that question in relation to us, whereas beforehand we had accountability over the student council or the court beforehand, whereas now I believe we have no ability to hold that body accountable whatsoever.
Well, let me try to take the first one first, and I'm not sure if I completely understand the second one, so let me come back to you. So you're absolutely right, but about the fact that it was quick. But I will say this about that: while it had long been a discussion, it was never a decision the chancellor had made formally. And when the chancellor came to us in, I think it was April or May of in the spring of this year, and said, I'm interested in making this change, and in particular, I'd like it to be effective in August. As you may imagine, there's a natural transition time with the move from one academic year to another in terms of the student hearing boards and responsibility. So it created a natural opportunity to be able to transition this, but it was extraordinarily quick. And I note that I'm not telling tales out of class to say to the chancellor, I wasn't sure that we could do it. Because ultimately this is at the chancellor's direction and comes entirely within, in this case, his authority. He is able to direct that. So it was a fast decision. It was not one in which it was without feedback, when we certainly had a decision and were prepared to be able to implement it, because I wasn't, to be perfectly honest, assured that we could get new policies written, everything updated, reviewed and approved through University Council and in place for the new academic year. When we got to a place in which we felt confident that we did have it ready to go, we created an opportunity. We did meet with both. I met with Katie and Julia at the time. We had some conversations. I know they talked with their staff, and we answered questions, provided some sort of overviews. We did the similar thing for faculty council, but ultimately it was a chancellor decision and at his discretion. And so because we changed up the model and we don't have COSC, which was the committee Committee on Student Conduct before that reviewed policy, made decisions. We have reframed this to an advisory board. That is an advisory committee that will be on which both students, faculty, and staff will serve. There will still be accountability in so much as we will be advising at a high level. I know I said earlier, due to federal privacy laws and also university practices regarding confidentiality, we don't talk about individual cases, but we will still share sort of high level information regarding such things as time to resolution on cases, equity issues such as we can, so that that is non-identifiable, non-personally identifiable information and so forth. So the idea is to still make sure that it's responsive to the university community, but you're right in that the policy has changed and our practice has changed. So that I should be clear to say one important thing. The previous policy was the extension of authority delegated by the chancellor. Once the chancellor rescinded that delegation, everything came back with it. So we basically started afresh. So that's why it's a good bit different, I think, than what was existed prior to. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
You bet. We took a deep dive on conduct today. I hope I didn't sort of chill the room.
You guys have any other questions while they are here?
Yeah, or anything online? I know that there were people
I
online.
don't think, Mandy, did you have a follow-up on that? Go ahead, Mandy. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to stay with us. I wish that we had had more opportunity to talk with the other administrators as well, particularly because this question that we're discussing has so much to do with the chancellor's decisions. But I wonder if you could speak at all to, we've talked a little bit about the suddenness of the announcement of this decision, but I wonder if you could speak at all to the timing of this decision and the fact that it came during such a time of unrest for so many of our students, as we saw protests on campus. I think that felt, at least for the constituents that I've spoken with, it felt like a very chilling moment. And it definitely seemed related to at least the announcement of it seemed related to the unrest that was taking place on campus and the pretty clear repression of student protesters, pro-Palestinian and anti-war student protesters.
Well, again, I would just go back to what I'd said before, which is that the decision extended from discussions that had been in place. I've only been here at Carolina for 4 years, but during my 4 years here, and I know preceding me for a number of years, my colleague Jonathan Sauls, I think, has been at the university for 15, and he oversees more directly that area, and said it's been a part of a conversation that he's experienced for his entire time here. I can tell you, I mean, I won't speak for the chancellor here. I can tell you from my vantage point, and certainly as it relates to my advocacy on behalf of students and trying to make sure that we have a process that is as developmental and fair and timely. And, at the end of the day, the conduct process that we offer in student development teams across the country is designed to, as much as possible, support students, create some appropriate norms and repercussions when there are violations of policies, but ultimately to get students back on track. I mean, when they work, that's what they're designed to do. And so it was not tied, I'll be very clear and use my I statements here, it was not tied to any sort of ongoing cases that were existing at the time from my perspective. I do think it was a matter of when the chancellor had an opportunity to review the landscape, talk with various folks, and ultimately made a decision that, yes, this is a change that had been a long time coming and we needed to make it, and a desire to try to take advantage of the summer transition period in order to be able to implement so that we could start fresh with a new academic year. I think that's why he made that decision, not related to any ongoing cases. But I absolutely hear you that you felt the timing was concerning and appreciate that very much.
Thank you for that response. And just one more follow-up to that. How can we be sure that, we are seeing many students related to the pro-Palestinian and anti-war demonstrations on campus being taken up with this code of conduct? How can we be sure with this change that y'all are going to continue to support freedom of speech when considering, and freedom of demonstration on campus when it comes to the procedures with the changes here?
Well, I appreciate the question. I could certainly see a connection there, but I would I would just say that those two things are distinct. Freedom of expression and free speech, as somebody who teaches, also wears a faculty hat and teaches on these issues in education, that's the foundation and the bedrock of what we are. These are philosophies and principles that allow us to talk in the classroom, to teach, to conduct research on areas and topics that are controversial, to be able to debate, to be able to sort of respect differences of opinion as it relates to both personal views and sort of academic issues of academic discipline. We do, however, have rules regarding how the university land facilities, operations may be used and or interrupted or not. So while we absolutely support individuals' ability to pursue free speech and expression on campus, there are some things that often may be tied to free speech and expression, but I would say as distinct in terms of engaging in civil disobedience or demonstrative activity that are violations of the university code. In the same way that while we support academic freedom, there are plagiarism issues that are violations of the academic code. And so again, there, I think, is a whole universe of things that you can engage in as it relates to free speech and expression that we absolutely support. But there are some rules such as the ability to set up encampments, you cannot disrupt university operations that are violations of university policies. And that's when the student code of conduct or other university policies kick in. And Aaron, did you?
I was just gonna say, maybe helpful to it just may also be helpful to clarify that although the code of student conduct was announced at the start of the fall semester, honor court cases continued, and any violations of the honor code that took place prior to the change to the new code of conduct system would still be adjudicated under the honor code, right? So we have been adjudicating, the honor code has still been operational through, I think, the entire fall semester in resolving cases going backwards pertaining to both cases that have been referenced here today and many other cases, right? So I think it's just important to note that it's not like all of a sudden cases that were in the honor court system as of August, can't remember the first day of classes, 22nd, whatever it was. It's not like that day we just shifted all those classes into a new model cases. Sorry, all of those cases continued with the honor code until resolution.
And do still continue. We do allow students, any student who had a case under the old honor code may still pursue that process. We are honoring that honor code. Students do have an option to be able to elect to move to the new student code of conduct if they wish, but otherwise we are, we are sticking with that policy and process until that particular case is concluded. So it's a really important note. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to encourage, if anybody else has any questions, I would encourage y'all to email and set up a meeting time with student services, just so that we can respect both their time, because I know they need to get to an event at 7, and our time, as we have 5 pieces of legislation to get through tonight. So I just want to thank y'all for coming.
Thank you. And similarly, we're happy to come back. So please feel free to invite us if there are specific topics you'd like us to come present on. Glad to do it. Thanks, everybody, for today.
Hey, do I hear a motion to resume the agenda? Do I hear a second? Cool. We have 5 pieces of legislation tonight. The first one is November Travel Awards, second December appropriations, the FAIR Act, Wellbeing Day Policy Resolution, and the Accessibility Resolution. And before we do that, Leah is gonna give her, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Do y'all have to motion for that to move me up on the, I didn't know.
Is there a motion to resuspend the agenda so that Julia can give her second? Okay, I will give the microphone to Julia. Thank you for attending. I know this is a little bit out of order, so I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. I just have to go to another Senate meeting after this, so that's happening soon. But thank you guys for letting me speak earlier in the meeting. I don't have too many updates. The first one, I'll just continue to reiterate about the meal swap donation plan that we've been advocating for. And so we were able to get to 500 results on our survey, which basically was just asking students about food insecurity on campus, whether they have experienced it or they know of somebody that's experienced it, and whether or not they would be in support of the meal swap donation plan. Overwhelming majority, about 97% of students said that they would be. And so we're super excited about that because we're going to be presenting this data again to the BOT in January. And we have seen so many of our peer institutions doing the meal swap donation plan. So we feel pretty confident, and the Dean of Students as well, and other administrators on campus feel pretty confident that it will be able to come to fruition in the fall. So that's great. The second update that I have is just me and the provost have been working on an interfaith initiative. We were brainstorming having more places that students can practice prayer or meditation on campus, given that some groups on campus don't have that space available to them, and in fact have to try to go to the different student union and reserve those spaces on a day-to-day. Particularly the Muslim Student Association doesn't have a designated space on campus. So we thought by providing an interfaith, we thought by providing more opportunities for interfaith spaces on campus, that this would be overall better for all students on campus. And so we've kind of been discussing potential ways to do that. We've looked at a lot of peer institutions such as NC State, Emory, Harvard, all these different schools.
A lot of
And
food.
we found that a lot of them have non-reservable 24/7 access spaces in their campus. Some of them are led by chaplains, and some of them are just led by different groups on campus, like student affairs. And so we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to bring something similar to UNC. Another idea we had talked about was turning one of the halls on campus, and particularly Girard Hall, into like an interfaith center that would have lounges and conference rooms and like an interfaith library. But we're still kind of working out the kinks and trying to see if that's something that would be feasible. But the provost and I are going to be essentially pitching a proposal to the chancellor about how this could come to fruition next year. So we are pretty excited about that. But if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. But other than that, that's all my bits. Yes.
Is there a particular reason for the choice of Girard Hall?
The reason was that sometimes that it's not in use a lot. So that space on campus has only been used to do like receptions. I remember the last time they used it was for the installation of the chancellor. But I also know that Carolina Performing Arts uses it sometimes. But the thing about it is we wanted the rooms to be able to be of use to students anytime. So it'd be kind of hard to work around the schedules of receptions, but also Carolina Performing Arts. So that's why we were kind of still up in the air about that space.
Hall, I know that the church I attend actually started meeting there about 50 years ago, so it's got a history as an interfaith space like that.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your night.
Before I ask if we're going to resume, does anybody else need to go out of order? Seeing none, so is there a motion to resume the meeting agenda? Is there a second? Cool. So I am going to go and hand this over to Fernando for the travel awards, November travel awards. And I'm going to get that up on the screen. And right, you good to talk, Fernando?
Fernando Quijano, business PhD and chair of the Travel Awards Committee. In this bill, we're introducing, the monthly recommendation of which awards, travel awards to be given. This period, we had a total of 29 applicants. Of these, 3 were ineligible because they were out applying for travel outside of the approved deadlines. And out of them, 11 were chosen to be awarded, and a total of 15 were not funded. This was mostly thinking and continue to manage our budget as the year continues to grow to ensure that we have enough budget to account for all future periods. As of right now, we are proposing $5,500 of travel awards for this period, and this would leave estimated funds for future cycles of around $6,000. And I'm open to any questions people might have.
Questions? Going once, going twice.
Sorry, I have one real quick on
go ahead.
Zoom. I don't know how to raise my hand. Sorry. Samantha Beck, pathology. I noticed this bill only went to, or was only voted yes by 2 of the members of if you could go back up to the top, 2 of the members of the travel awards committee. Did that meeting, I'm just wondering why there was only 2 out of 5/4.
Main thing, well, in the eyes, I think I don't count myself as being the one that presents the bill. So it would have been out of the other 4 members because of the date in which this month's meeting is taking place, which is a week before what it usually be. We had to change our meeting space and we had some issues getting everyone together. So we had in the meeting, though everyone provided their scores, we had myself and 2 other members of the committee meet as we went through all the awards and all the decisions.
Oh, okay. So it was still scored by everyone, just the actual meeting. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Narmada Venkateshwaran from Geography and Environment. Yeah, I was just curious, are other senators privy to those who didn't get travel awards or have access to that information? Just for future reference.
Which information are you asking if people are privy?
As part of the travel awards committee, like, I'm not part of the travel awards, but like, are other senators privy to see the decisions made, like, as opposed to the final list of those approved upon? Are we able to see people who are denied or such?
That information is available. If you ask me, I can show the list of all the applications sent and
Okay.
the decision, I believe.
But it would be on like a case, like I would like ask you every time, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, that information is not necessarily posted. We
Yeah,
have it like
Okay,
in our like SharePoint.
okay,
Well, actually, no, because part of this process is blinded. So that everyone that reviews it, the only person that gets to see the names associated with the applications is myself,
okay,
because I blinded to everyone else. So, to have a
yeah,
fair process where no one is privy to the information. But the final decisions, I believe, can be seen. I don't
Okay.
think there's anything. It's just the management of that. But I can definitely.
okay, no, it's just like if constituents, right, like if our constituents then ask for like updates on like like they will receive decisions, but if there's like kind of clarity that we're able to provide them at least about the process in which
Yeah,
determined, okay,
for sure. And if they have any question, my email goes to the list server of Travel Awards.
okay,
And one of my tasks as chair is managing all the incoming questions about all the applications, giving updates. And so that is part of my role, and I consistently do it, sometimes through senators for their constituents, and sometimes just directly communicating with the constituents.
okay,
But for sure, it's a totally open line of communication. We want to be transparent and keep people informed. It's kind of established process. Sometimes people don't know the timelines and stuff like that, mostly for when the decisions will be made. And we try to accommodate as best as we can and keep people informed so they know what's going on.
okay.
Thank you. Tyler West, epidemiology. Kind of bouncing off this last question. Let's say a previous chair was in the committee and then they made a decision. Are you able to walk through or assist people applying by looking retroactively at a decision that was made by a previous committee to say, here's what you can do this time around to improve your chances of being selected, or maybe you did something wrong in a previous one. I'm just trying to wonder, some people in my constituents have been discouraged from reapplying simply because they've been denied in the past, but I don't want them to feel discouraged, and I'm just trying to work out what future steps they should take and what resources they have to understand what they'll do to get accepted this time, and unlike the last time when they were rejected.
For sure. Due to the sheer amount of applications we receive, we usually don't provide proactively feedback on each every application. However, if a constituent or any other student wanted to get more specific feedback, this can be done. Usually will be done more on a one-by-one basis. How we do have a history of every single award or every application, how it has been scored by the different members. The farther back you go, the harder it is to get all the details, mostly because even though each member of the committee scores based on the rubric and will have their individual set of scores for each of 6 different items, we usually keep score of just the total. However, if it's a recent decision, it can definitely be addressed. And, this might sound I don't know if we're kind of redundant, but the main thing is there is a rubric that we try to communicate. It's on the website and is very clear of 3 different types of travel awards that can be selected. One of the main issues people have is that they don't realize, one, how competitive these are and that people put a lot of effort. And so we get a lot of applications that are just, oh, I would like this money because I'm going to X place and it'll be good for me. And because this is a comparative monthly to monthly process, that usually will not make the cut. But we are more than glad to give more information. For example, through one of our members who works with one of the professional student communities, there's been a lot of questions because they had over 60 applications, all of them denied in the month of September or October. And we have had conversations about how he can address those differences. And in that particular case, a lot of it was that a lot of the applications considered the wrong type of travel, considering conference travel rather than professional development. And if they had done that, that would have improved. But again, we try to be open and transparent. It's just we can't give everyone proactively a reason, but we are open to, in certain cases, mostly if the student is really proactive about understanding what they did and how they can better communicate their needs in the future. We're more than open to have those conversations.
Any other questions?
Is there a motion to move in discussion on this? Is there a second? Cool. We will go to the next piece of legislation.
Yes.
Okay, this is going to be 55-025, December appropriations request by Samantha Beck. Please feel free to unmute yourself and we'll go from there. And we'll run microphones around.
Yes, hello. So this, like William said, is the December appropriations bill. We had 4 requests this month, and we decided to fund all of them in half of them in full funding and then half of them partial funding, for a total of $3,555. And I will give my updates on how much money we have left later.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this? Online? MRN, I will get, no.
MRN linguistics, can you clarify what for the LGPSA, the event/funding request is purchase of digital camera or their headshot? Can you clarify what an or their headshot is?
I think that would be a typo, and that would be a for their headshots.
I see, thank you.
Yes. Which
They're
would be
like-
a friendly amendment if so moved.
There a second?
I don't
Okay.
think we need a second if it's a friendly.
Hey, just trying. Audience engagement is important. Um, and seeing no objections, since it's again friendly, I will make those changes later as this is not on my own computer. Is there a motion to end discussion on this? Any second? Oh, we will go to the third one. And I believe I'm handing this to Benjamin King. You are more than welcome. You're also welcome to scroll through it. All right.
I'll try and be quick because I know everyone's tired. So this bill will give each unit it's sort of two-pronged. It will give each unit 2 senators by default rather than the default 1 and having to request a second. And then the second part is that each senator will get their own vote on everything rather than units having to sort of duke it out over which way to vote. I know I speak for my unit. Shout out Javier, love you, man, but sometimes we disagree. And it's kind of hard to try and figure out, okay, is it your turn to vote? Is it my turn to vote? Because even within our constituents, our program, there's a diversity of opinion. I'm sure that's the same for y'all. And so you're probably thinking, okay, what if my unit has 1 vote or 1 senator? I'm getting less of a vote. So what this bill would do is it would not go into effect until a spring special election can happen, which is being worked on, kind of. I think there's a mess with the Board of Elections from what I understand. But this bill would not go into effect until a spring special election can occur, which means that there's time, if your unit has 1 senator, to work on finding someone to run for the second position. This bill also reduces, it used to be that there was 30 days. Let's see. Yeah, there were 30 days before the election. You needed to notify the Board of Elections and the Senior Vice President about your election plans. This reduces it to 5, just in case there's like a short turnaround on the spring election. Because right now it's kind of up in the air on when that'll happen. Just to maybe mitigate some concerns, this does not change anything for allocations. This does not change anything for quorum. And this does not change anything for attendance. That will all still be calculated by unit. So only 1 senator would still have to show up in order for your unit to be counted present. So I'm open to taking questions. All the language of the bill is just taking out the areas in the code where it says like an affirmative vote of the RUs, it just replaces RUs with senator. And then there's that change from 30 days to 5 days. And then I think that's it. I think that's all the good stuff.
Running around questions.
I will go first. Yeah. I didn't see anybody on Zoom, but I also raised my hand in the middle of
There's also
uh,
someone on Zoom. Sorry, it looks like Kaylin Bennington.
would you like to go first, Kaylin, or am I okay to go first?
Maybe like.
Nope, you can go first. Go for it.
Perfect. I just want to say we talked about this in exec. We talked about this in SOGAPs, or was it SOGAPs? Sorry, R&J. Too many committees. And exec, we agreed upon this. Katie and I, we looked at this and we kind of scratched our heads at the language of this, and we asked ourselves if we had been voting wrong for the entirety of GPSG's existence. And so this makes this a lot clearer. One question, and I can't make motions, but one question in R&J, I believe we talked about starting this in August. rather than after the spring. Was that changed or what am I misremembering?
Yeah, so we had talked about that and it wasn't something I wanted to do. So, I mean, if like folks wanted to vote on it, like maybe my feelings won't be hurt, but it's kind of selfish. I graduate in May and I want to start voting by senator before I graduate. So that's kind of a selfish answer.
I'm going to respond to that. Just for not changing allocations, not changing, like with all the logistical issues that this introduces, and the possibility that Board of Elections, I love them, and they are doing things, I assume. They have gotten back to me that they elected a chair last week or 2 weeks ago. And we hired them in October. So it has been a lengthy process. And so far I've been, it's been suggested to me that we might have a special election by the end of January. And that is a very big maybe. And so that could be pushed back into the general election in February. So this can happen. And this, I just don't know if if the language of after the special election is concrete enough.
I think there's a question online and then Mara, I'll come to you.
Yes, thank you. This is Kaylin from the Health Behavior Department. Kind of stemming off of that, my concerns with this resolution is not so much the content as much as like the implementation time. I just know that some departments have only one senator, and that's not by choice. I was running unopposed and I was the only person that was interested in being a senator for this session. So I'm kind of trying to see how I can take that disadvantage and kind of still play to the voting power. I understand the importance of popular vote and making sure that every single senator gets a vote. However, I am also concerned for the departments that haven't been able to elect a second senator to ensure that there's equal voting power. Equal voting power amongst the departments. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's something that we discussed. Well, it's something I thought about originally when writing the bill, and then it was discussed in committee. And what I arrived at as sort of a conclusion for this question is that hopefully this would encourage units to find someone to run as a second senator. That might sound kind of trite, but say my unit only elects one senator, or we have the power to elect two senators, but only one person ran. I'm the only person that ran. Now that there's an opening for two senators, I have the opportunity to have two senators representing my unit. Hopefully this is empowering units to say, I can have as much, like my unit, we probably have, 60 students? But I know there's units that have like hundreds of students. And so hopefully this is empowering some of those smaller units that maybe have had trouble finding a second senator to say we can have as much representation in the Senate as a huge unit, if that makes sense. So I understand where you're coming from, but that's sort of the angle that I was looking at.
Sure. No, that's completely understandable. I definitely understand your thinking behind that. Is there any plan? I know Will had kind of mentioned this for a special election to kind of get caught up for the departments that only have one senator, or is there any sort of dissemination plan for the departments that don't have any senators so that way they can be informed of how this process is going to work?
Yeah, so under the current language of the bill, and Will can probably speak on this better, but my understanding is that once the bill is passed, senators will automatically be registered for two senators. They will have they will automatically elect two senators. But maybe Will could speak better about what that process looks like. Yeah.
Sure. The process for allowing y'all to have two senators, at least on my end, is just clicking two buttons in Excel. And then now you have, instead of one merged box, you have two boxes. And that means you have two senators. For Board of Elections, I don't exactly know on their end, like what that needs. But again, for contacting schools that don't have any senators currently, that is a goal of mine. One of the toxicology programs, I always get them mixed up. It's the one that has no senators in my spreadsheet. They also, I think they have 23 students. So I'm going to have to reach out to their director and ask them, hey, do you still want a senator? Because if their director and their students don't want senators, we can just remove senators from schools and just take them off our list. Because a number of people on my list, like I think Katie said, there has never been anybody in accounting, or there's a number of senator positions that just have not had senators because there's been no interest. And so one of the goals of mine is just to purge them from our list and get rid of their position entirely. So does that answer everybody's question?
Yeah. Oh, I apologize. Is it okay if I finish up real quick?
No, go
Just
ahead.
one
I'm
more
sorry.
thing. So I just want to make sure that there are provisions that are going to be taken for if this resolution gets passed, it's not going to be unfavorable to the departments that only have one senator because of when the timing this was introduced. Like I said, I have no problem with the content of the resolution so much as the timing that it's being introduced at. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you have a good point. Section 3, so all of this, is that touchscreen? Okay. All of this will become effective upon the first duly called Senate meeting immediately following the completion of the special election, with the exception of the provision talking about elections. So that would go ahead and change. And then also 1.210, which will go ahead and give senators, or go ahead and give units to senators. So that will go ahead and change. The rest won't go into effect until we can have a special election. So no one should be disadvantaged because this won't go into effect until the election can occur.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Omar Marabi from Bioinformatics Computational Biology. I want to say that I very much support this. I think it's great. This emulates how, the actual US Senate works with, each state getting 2 votes. I guess one thing that I would want to very briefly say and ask about is maybe we might want to consider implementing this after the spring general election and not the special election, given that, as Will said, everything going on with the Board of Elections and some concerns over, how the timing might impact everything, that maybe this might be better implemented just after February.
Yeah, so I think maybe at this point, I would make a motion to change the language. I'll do that in just a second. And then we can just vote on it. Like I said, it's not gonna hurt my feelings. Nick, did you have something?
Yeah, just a point of information on this one here. As the author of the bill, if you'd like to make a friendly amendment to the bill, you can. If you want to propose a motion, then we're going to have to debate the motion and the wording exactly. So is there a friendly amendment you would like to make to your own bill?
I don't really want to.
Okay.
I also don't want to go through the past. I'll make it a friendly amendment. I'm tired.
Okay.
So I will amend this bill to read, all parts of this act shall become effective upon the first duly called Senate meeting immediately following the completion of the spring 2025 general election.
Okay.
Point blank period. Anybody?
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Sorry for a minute. Samantha, sorry, I have my running order on here. Samantha, you're next up on the list.
Yes, hello, Samantha from Pathology. I still have a few concerns regarding like the disadvantage of the units that tend to have difficulties filling the position. So, for example, I always thought the reason that we could get two was to split the job, so that way it was more manageable for potentially two people to handle, right? My unit partner doesn't have to, my co-senator doesn't have to be here for every single meeting. I don't like, we can switch on and off, so that way we don't have to sit through a 2+ hour meeting that tends to go over quite often. But I still feel that even with two senators, it would be difficult to fill these positions with people that have the space and time. And that for the units that might not have that ability, it might still be at a disadvantage for them, even with two.
I think that's a fair point. I don't really have anything else to add that I haven't said already, but I'll say it again that this would encourage units that haven't elected two senators or have only elected, this would encourage units that don't typically elect senators, like accounting or whatever departments are, as well as units that have only elected one. This should encourage them to elect two. I hear what you're saying. That's all I've got to say.
So I'm next in the rotation, so I do have a question on this. So in other governing bodies, they allow members to vote by proxy. Would you be open to the idea of what Samantha is talking about here? Is that generally speaking, we have two senators to alleviate the burden, but not every unit, including my own, has two senators. And so would you be open to amending this to include a availability of allowing a member to vote by proxy for their co-senator? And if that department does not, or that representative unit does not have a co-senator, then that senator would automatically be given the proxy vote for the vacant seat.
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. Normally, I'm not a fan of proxy voting, just in general, but I think that's a good idea. I'm trying to think if we would be best served to include that, because this isn't going into effect for a while. I'm wondering if we would be best served to write a separate bill, or would you want to amend that now? Like come up with some language?
Yeah, I mean, that was my question for you. Would you consider it friendly to do that? And then if so, we could quickly draft something up for it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think so. I think maybe if you type that up, I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. I will draft something.
Okay.
James, on Zoom, did you have a question? You had your hand raised.
No, I withdraw.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Emma.
And marine linguistics. I think my question is primarily, what is the benefit of this bill? Because as things currently stand, all the units are equally represented regardless of whether they get two people in the Senate or not. I don't see that this would encourage a second person to run for the Senate. Given I have talked to my constituents and they are all like, we are so glad you ran for Senate. None of us ever want to do that. So what do you see as the primary benefit that we would all draw from this bill passing?
Yeah, thank you for your question. On the second half of your question concerning encouraging students to run for Senate, I think time will tell. We don't really know. I mean, I think a lot of units have struggled, but I think if there's a case to be made of, okay, well now, if we don't elect a second senator, we're missing out on representation. The first part of your question concerning the benefit of the bill, this largely emerged out of a concern for sometimes there was a difference of opinion. Like I said, I love Javier, but we disagree sometimes on bills or resolutions. And so this would allow us to each have our individual vote. We're still representing our constituents, but it allows maybe for some difference of opinion on voting because there is a difference of opinion amongst our program and our constituents.
So the primary benefit to the senators would be we would all get to vote, and the benefit to the constituents might be if your one senator doesn't agree with you, you can go to the other senator and get them to sponsor the bill or vote or whatever the thing is.
Sure.
Fernando, then.
Fernando Quijano, business PhD. Before my question, just following on Emma's question, I'm just going to propose another benefit that has not been discussed. Mostly from and I've seen in other programs, having a second senator would also make it easier to have better plan for succession so that there is experience within each unit of how things work. And then, for example, if you have an amazing representative for your unit, most of us have served the last few years. We can remember Kendall Winter musicology. If she did not have the opportunity to pass all her knowledge to someone else, musicology might have not have the same representation that it had before. Having a second senator, probably someone in a different year, would definitely allow for a better passing of information that would definitely benefit not only the constituents, but also this body by allowing for a lot of the institutional knowledge to be maintained and passed on. Having said that, my question is, and this specifically to about the 5 days, we've discussed a little bit how the Board of Elections sometimes is not the quickest. Did they have any preview or did anyone discuss with them this modification to the 5 days? Just thinking from all the work that they probably do that goes into planning an election, I just worry whether 5 days would be enough for them to do any necessary change, mostly if this were to be made by multiple units at the same time. So it comes more from, is this realistic, this change to this 30 days to 5 days? I know it was particularly mentioned and changed due to the special election that we're planning, but my main worry is, did they have any voice into this change? And is that something that the Board of Election individuals see it as possible, or would this be a strain on the resources that would unfortunately lead to probable difficulties in the future?
Yeah, so I'll just say up front, no conversation was had with any members of the Board of Election. With all due respect to the Board of Elections, that's their job. And frankly, as chair of oversight, it seems like maybe there needs to be some oversight. So I think 5 days isn't necessarily out of the realm of possibilities. I mean, it's 5 days to click a couple buttons and change. I see where you're coming from. Like, I'm not trying to be an ass, but like, with all due respect, like, I mean, they're the Board of Elections.
Would you consider it a friendly election to move it to 15 days, just so it's still improved, but allows for, if eventually this gets changed, to then make it quicker if it's possible, instead of it being such a strong change from the get-go?
Sure, I'd accept that as a friendly amendment.
Hey everyone, Brian Lackman, advisor. Just as a logistical thing around Board of Elections, as long as there's advance notice to the board in terms of like, hey, there's an election on this date time, they definitely can get that. One of the challenges at times has been that IT, because we have to get lists from ITS to ensure that, they have not always been the fastest in giving that list to the Board of Elections, even when the request is made in advance. They try and pull them very close so they have the most accurate possible student data. So it's just like one logistical thing, but for the most part, as long as, if there was an election held the day before and they wanted it set to, hold election tomorrow, that wouldn't be feasible just from an ITS perspective. But realistically, as long as they're scheduled out in advance, they should be fine. But I'd say at least a week's notice, the ITS is important. That's like a 5 business days, not just like a 5 days, including weekends. So.
Thank you for the insight. So I think 15 days sounds like a good sort of medium.
Hi, Tyler West, epidemiology. I want to speak in favor of this resolution for a couple of reasons. The first being that as someone coming from a unit of over 250 students, it can be very hard for myself to reach out to every single individual. And so as well, I find that my other person in my unit who is a PhD student, myself a master's student, this gives us a lot more flexibility to be a representative of our bodies that we work with. That being, I can be a representative vote for my master's students equivalents, and then he can be one for his PhD equivalents. So I do think that for that reason, it is beneficial for us to have our separate votes when we have very separate things going on, especially with discussions of stipend and other things that affect some of us more than others. It's really important for us to have a difference of opinion on that. And then I also want to just make clear as well that for those who are saying similar things. I think this is going to be a really great incentive to get other people to show up. I know that specifically with my school in Gillings, a lot of us have a lot of master's and PhD students, and I really think this format would be really effective across the board with several different units of having a master's student, a PhD. It doesn't have to be that way, but I absolutely think that this is a great way of incentivizing splitting up these votes so that you have two different bodies, and we are at the end of the day the graduate and professional student government. So including all voices is going to be really important with this. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And good point that echoed what Fernando said about sort of having the institutional knowledge. That's kind of what our program does. Is we're only a 2-year program, so typically a second year and a first year will run, and it just sort of rotates each year, and it allows the second year to meet with the first year and pass on that knowledge, and then it happens the next year. So hopefully we'll see some things like that, even in programs that are longer. Any other questions?
Yeah. Ellen? We cannot hear you if you are speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So I just want to say that I agree with the idea that this would probably encourage units to have 2 senators. I think right now part of the reason that a lot of units don't have 2 senators is that there's not really a point other than divvying up the work. So generally just speaking in support of this bill. I also just have a question about Nick's proxy voting idea. Would that give individuals who don't have co-senators 2 votes?
Hi, Ellen. Yes, in essence, it would until the second seat is filled. So in essence, you would have 2 votes as you'd be voting for the vacant proxy seat until that, until that second seat is eventually filled by either a special election or one of the general elections.
So this is like a temporary idea?
Yeah, to me, I view it as a stopgap measure until you can find somebody, so here's the thing. I totally agree with this bill, and I think in essence, it does help incentivize, make departments get 2 senators. However, I also know graduate students aren't always the most willing to take on additional responsibilities outside of what we already have between classes and research and whatnot. So until that person can help find a second person who's willing to take on the duties and responsibilities of a senator, I figure it's best to also make sure, though, that the representative unit isn't given half the weight of every other representative unit. So this way it tries to maintain an even keel that every representative unit still gets 2 votes. And for a temporary period of time, that senator would have the ability to vote as by proxy. And I think, Ben, I had sent the amendment to you.
Yeah, one question I had was where in the code did you want this placed?
I was putting it as a separate section within it, so this way, because it would be creating new code, I believe.
So like in the appendix, or I'm just like confused on what I should write out.
I think it would be like, depending upon how you want to put it, it would be, so you have section 3 below.
Oh, section 3.
So you could call that, if you want, section 4.
I do just want to say, like, I don't really like the idea of one person having 2 votes. Like, like if this were like a temporary solution, like if we did decide to implement this like right after the special election, and this were like a temporary solution until there could be a general election, I would be in support of that. But I don't really like the idea of if the units just have 1 senator, of that one person getting 2 votes permanently. I don't know if I have thoughts on that.
However, it also disincentivizes units if they only have 1 vote and they consistently have 1 vote. But I'm gonna do you have a question?
Javier Limon, Public Administration. I kind of want to echo what was just said. I'm not sure having a proxy vote. I also understand that sentiment you just brought forward, but say, for example, they don't do the effort in recruiting, or they just aren't able to find someone for a whole year. They just have a proxy vote and just have essentially 2 votes. I think it just kind of undermines the 1 person, 1 vote principle. And, I get it. It does suck that there is some sort of unfairness that they aren't able to find someone else. But at the end of the day, someone from the unit should step up, as kind of crappy as that sounds. So other units are able to find it. I think I'm just not sure having 2 votes should be possible. So I feel like if anything, we should debate it as a separate bill if we're going to add this, as discussed earlier. I just feel like that could be more comprehensive and it might be more fleshed out than just adding it as an amendment right away until we kind of have something.
So my response to that would be this. We're echoing or trying to echo the US Senate here in the sense where every state has 2 senators. We are not the US Senate. Not everybody wants to take on this responsibility, and I think it's unfair to units to be totally cut in half in what the representative units would be. I know for me, and I have a large department as well in health policy and management. It's not that we don't have a share of master's students. No master's students wanted the job. And so because of that, I don't know whether or not my unit will have a second senator. In essence, my unit now is going to be cut in half, and other units as well will have the same. Musicology, Kendall Winter, I think the department is 20 people. I don't know that everybody wants to take that on. I saw Omar, go ahead. You have a question.
Yeah, I guess kind of a question and then a follow-up. But so with this proxy voting, would this mean like I'm just going to use Ellen as an example because she's my co-sender. If Ellen did not want to come to this meeting, could Ellen tell me, okay, I want to vote this way on this bill. Can you vote in my place? Is that how that would work?
That's how I envision it, is that you could then vote for her on her behalf.
And then, okay, and then I guess from a practical standpoint, what if that were to happen and I vote a certain way and then Ellen comes back and is like, what the hell? Like, I didn't want to vote like that. And what would, I guess, practically, like, what would be the recourse or what would be, how would we fix that?
I think within the voting record, we'd have to have something here on, and I think this is how they recorded as well. I'm voting proxy for so-and-so, I'm voting proxy for Ellen, and this is how I'm voting. At that point in time, if you decide to disregard what Ellen wanted to do, I think you would have to talk with Ellen on that, on figuring out your problem on that one.
No, yeah, I guess, but like.
I understand that, that in essence, you could override Ellen's will on.
Right, and would she have no recourse basically in that situation?
I think once it's a recorded vote, it's a recorded vote. I think Ellen would have to go back. William, what do you think?
Can I motion to take this proxy voting thing and put it in a separate bill? Because I don't really agree with it. And I think we could debate this for a long time, and it seems like it's not super urgent if this isn't going in until the.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's not urgent. So I think what I would like to do at this point is remove it. And then I'd be happy to work with Nick to write a separate bill. And then we can sort of hash this out in the rules committee to figure out maybe what the best course of action is. So at this time, I would, I would like to move the question. I'm tired.
Are there any seconds to that?
Second.
Are there, does anybody oppose that? Seeing none, we will move to the next one. Thank you, Senator King. We are going to move to 55-027, which is a resolution to call for the adoption of a well-being day policy that addresses the needs of graduate and professional students, written by Fernando Quijano. I will give you the mic. It's okay, I need the exercise.
Fernando Quijano, business PhD. You've already heard my voice a couple of times, so I'm like this quick. We all know well-being days are meant to be in the benefit of all students so that they can focus on their well-being, both physical and mental. However, there is a confusion when it comes to graduate professional students where not all of our tasks are associated with being in class. So just having a day when there's no class doesn't quite affect all of us equally. And it is not clear also how this affects us, both for students and for our advisors and faculty, what happens with other responsibilities on well-being days. So with this resolution, what I'm asking is directly asking the provost to create a policy on how well-being days should be, how they should deal with non-class graduate and professional student tasks. So this mostly means that if there's a lab meeting on a well-being day, that it would be moved to a different day, because well-being days should also not only include us being in class, but also being able to disconnect from some of these tasks so we can focus on our health. So pretty much, unfortunately, unless there's a clear policy and instruction from above, both the confusion that students, faculty, PIs, and advisors have will continue to be whereas if there is a clear policy that comes from the provost, it would make it easy for students to also advocate for themselves and being able to take well-being days for themselves as they are intended to be. That's kind of the short of this resolution. If anyone has any questions, I'll gladly address them.
I think I see Mandy first, and let's go with Mandy first, and then if you have just raise your placard.
Hi, thank you. Mandy from English and Complet. I want to say, first of all, I strongly support this bill. I think it's highly necessary. I don't know if this is true in all departments, but it is certainly true in my department that professors are very inclined to schedule events or meetings of import to graduate students on well-being days. It does feel very disregarded for graduate students. So I really support this. I did want to suggest or ask if we might consider some language that are maybe being a little bit more specific with some of these, like I think looking specifically at the non-essential tasks. I wonder if it might be worthwhile, or if we could consider incorporating some language that's a little bit more specific to, say, like the humanities. Things like guest lectures or lectures from guest speakers, movable departmental deadlines, reading groups, and or expectations on email communication was one I was also kind of thinking about as well. I mean, they are well-being days, but again, strongly in favor of this bill. I think it's a really necessary measure. I know that it can be really difficult to speak, to protect your time when you're addressing an advisor or professors. So, but wonder if we might be a little bit more specific or direct in the language there.
Yeah, I see that as a friendly. Oh, I see that as a friendly amendment. Would you be able to just send me some text and I can include it?
Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Lauren Babinet's Geography and Environment. Bit of a question on like the efficacy of the structure of a bill calling for the provost to do anything. I'm a first year and first term senator. When was the last time we called for the provost to do something and he did it?
I do not know. However, having this in the communication would allow us to have a direct line of communication on this topic and highlight it. And also, I mentioned here that one of the things that we are addressing is taking into or leveraging the relationship with the Graduate Student Experience Initiative and leveraging all the work that Dean Mayor Davis is already doing, and seeing that also that can be communicated also to the working group. So even if this goes to the provost, I also going directly to the people in the Graduate Student Experience Initiative that are leading some of these working groups. Even if the provost immediately would not pay attention to this, it would go to other people that are working towards the recommendations that will go to the provost in a more procedural manner. So even if it's directly might not have an immediate effect, it's trying to address the process in multiple ways to eventually have that impact, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Just for the record, I like it.
Thank you.
I want to be a hater.
I think Leah's next. But while I'm walking back to the podium, we did address the issue of stipends with the provost, and that was quite rapid response after the study was done. There has been rapid response to considering how changes should be made. So especially since provost is on, many of the exec members are on committees with provost. Yeah, Leah, you are welcome to ask your question.
Hi, sorry about that. Sorry if you can hear my background, but I was wondering in section 2, can we amend this to also say classes? So on behalf of my department and my constituents, we actually had to have mandatory classes during the past 2 well-being days. So I have not had a wellness day because we were told we had to go to class and that if we didn't go to this class, it would count against us and we would get failed out of the class.
I am aghast not knowing how to answer that because the whole idea of not having classes is because it's supposed to already be a given. But yes, we can definitely I can definitely make a change saying on top of class, just to reiterate that that is as it should be. But yes, I can add that language there as well.
Kayla Mason from cell biology. So I just wanted to reiterate what was just said because in my department, we have to take rigor and reproducibility courses mandatory by the NIH, and it's a multi-department course, and that was not canceled for wellness days. So, and that's from the director of graduate studies of 2 departments. So they are just completely not following whatever instruction there already is. So kind of what I was going to say is that I think the culture in a lot of like the research labs too is just kind of because we're more research heavy than I don't take classes except for that mandatory one anymore. It's kind of like not peer pressure related thing of when you show up or don't show up, but that almost is how it feels to the point where even when we're on like a condition 1 or condition 2 closure of the university, people still come in. So I think something more specific about non-essential lab work is going to have to be said in there because my PI, everything's essential. So I really like the no meetings and things like that, but it feels like sometimes that breaks up my day too, and I don't have to be. Sometimes it's more wellness for me than doing my work, and I feel like that'll just turn into my PI looking around and being like, why is this one person not here, but everybody else is? If that makes sense. I don't know how to exactly improve that, but I just can see this turning into like the President's Day when everybody shows up, and like if that makes sense.
No, I agree. And it's one of the reasons for writing this bill is that there is this culture across different departments and different labs that presence is required above and beyond anything, even the policies instrumented or implemented by the university. And the idea of this is having a clear policy that students can then leverage to advocate for themselves and saying, this is just not a me thing, this is a university thing. And here's the provost saying it, so yep.
All right, Mandy, you have your hand raised.
Hi, I just wanted to kind of follow up on a couple of the points that y'all just made. First of all, the mandatory classes on well-being days is outrageous and clearly a violation of current well-being day policies. And so I would maybe suggest that this bill include language that stresses the importance of enforcing or reiterating the current policies that do apply, right? So mandatory things should not be taking place on these days at all, including for graduate students. I also want to suggest, upon kind of thinking a little bit deeper about the language of the not quote unquote non-essential tasks, that might be better phrased to indicate that these things that are quote unquote non-essential are still of incredible import to us as graduate students, right? So I mentioned in my previous comment about things like visiting guest lectures and things like that. While they are not mandatory, they are a really crucial part of my ability to network and gain status and connections among scholars in my field. So we just might kind of think about broadening or revising that language to really stress that these are not non-essential things. These are things that are, while not mandatory, are still really important to our success as graduate students and our careers.
Is there, there was a hand raised, but is there a second to that? Are there any objections? Seeing none, we are going to in question on this bill, and I'm sorry, Brittany. And we are going to go to the next bill. I'm just going to quickly plug in my laptop so the Zoom doesn't die, but I'll get that up for you. It is 55-028, Accessibility and Safety Planning Resolution by Avery. Is Avery here?
Hey guys, Avery Baker, Public Policy. Hoping to make this quick, just wanted to highlight that UNC has a storied history of inaccessibility, and it is required obviously by multiple federal laws to provide accessible facilities and activities for everyone on this campus, including students. And we're highlighting some measures that we want the university to take in regards to prioritizing accessibility, especially for security and safety planning. And we thought a salient example that we could use is the security measures that were implemented during the week of October 7th this year, wherein me and many other students got an email around 8 p.m. Sunday night, October 6th, that certain buildings around the quad would be restricted to one card access only. And then we saw after the fact in multiple news articles that a lot of these one card readers were malfunctioning. Students were locked out of buildings. Students were unable to use accessibility buttons and enter or leave buildings, and this is unacceptable. So I'm here, and I think Elaine's on Zoom if you have any questions for us.
Questions?
Emma Rin, Linguistics. Is this bill looking primarily at ADA accessibility, at general accessibility because of one card reader problems, or at both?
Can you repeat your question?
Yes, so the situation I'm thinking of is the building which my office is in is, according to the ADA inspector who came by this summer, the least accessible building she's ever seen in her life. It has no one card reader though, so to people who don't need wheelchair access or something of the sort, it's perfectly accessible. There are other buildings on campus that have a wheelchair ramp or other ADA accessibility like an elevator, but the one card readers don't work. Is this bill looking to address both of these problems, or are you focusing more on one or the other?
We want to address both. I know, for example, Caldwell Hall is only accessible via going upstairs on any of the entrances, and that's an issue. We just pointed to one of the most recent and kind of high-profile examples of this, but we want to look at accessibility across the board on campus.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions? Is there one online?
Yes. I have a question. Samantha from Pathology. Very similar to the question about ADA that was just asked. I know during summer governance, we talked at length about potentially using some unused funds for ADA compliance. Has that gone anywhere?
Elaine, do you know the answer to that? I do not.
Sam, are you talking about like deferred maintenance, or will you ask your question a different way? Sorry.
I think I was talking about the deferred maintenance, and like I know it was like, yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. I think it's somewhere in the billions with a B of deferred maintenance to catch up. How much of that is to meet ADA compliance? I'm not sure. I would probably imagine it's still a number with a B behind it.
I had a response, or I had a comment, I guess, about the summer governance. I do not, I believe what we talked about was the architecture. I changed, talking with an architectural firm to get a wheelchair ramp for one of the buildings. And I also, I don't know if that's gone ahead or anything's been done with that. But it was costing about $700,000 to get that. ramp for that specific building. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So yes, that is a good question. Has it gone anywhere? I don't know. But next is Spirit.
Hello, Spirit Elder Communication. I will just add anecdotally, might be some fun verbiage for your call, that in Carolina Hall specifically, where I teach, that building has 3 entrances. 2 entrances on that day said to use your 1 card at the main entrance, and the main entrance did not even have a 1 card reader. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is, of course, unacceptable, and that is one of the examples that we read about when researching for this resolution. So thank you for sharing.
There's been a motion to question. Is there a second? Are there any objections? Seeing none, we will move away from this bill. Thank you, and I will collect microphones in a second. Fernando, for those friendly amendments, just cool. Is there a desire to see the friendly amendments on screen? Because I can do that. Otherwise, we'll just go into other materials. Okay, the ballot voting for on Heal Life should be up. This QR code, I think it is good. Also, I think this link is good. If not, please just go through the GPSG link on Heal Life, just like we've done every Senate before. And now we're going to go into updates. Of course, if the QR code does not work, please let me know, and that will be changed for next Senate meeting. I'm going, if Katie Heath is in on Zoom, you are welcome to go ahead and give your, yep, you are welcome to go ahead and give your updates while people are voting.
Yeah, hi everybody. I apologize I couldn't be there in person today. I have my oral preliminary exam this week, and for those of you that have done that, you know that it sort of takes all of your undivided attention to make that happen. So I'm excited to be back in January to see all of you in person again. I don't have a lot of updates to give everyone. I think that as the month has, this past couple of weeks, I guess, have gone on, I think it's been a lot of sort of wrapping up other things that we've already talked about. So I just did want to mention that I do have another remark scheduled. I'll be giving remarks to the Board of Trustees in January at the end of the month. So if anybody has anything as usual that you want me to bring up at the Board of Trustees meeting, I think that what I'm going to be talking about is student wellness, but I still have to iron it out a little bit exactly what my remarks will be. But of course, as always, if you have anything you want me to talk about, please let me know. And of course, I'm also always available during my office hours, so feel free to book a time and come talk. But I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday and some time off. And I know I'm really excited to have a little bit of time off after I'm done with my oral exam. So as always, just let me know if you need anything. And I'm not going to be super available this week, just as I'm getting ready for my exam. But in general, just let me know. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Katie. I know I'm going to be thinking of you and praying for you and hoping that that goes well. And I'm going to be praying for everybody that exams and everything goes well in the coming couple weeks. I'm going to move on to executive member announcements. I think Neil was in the Zoom, but are there any other executive members here that have announcements? I do have the November monthly announcements that I can hand out to y'all later. Please just send me an email. Y'all can access those somehow. But if you want a direct copy, just email me. Seeing there's no other exec members here, I'm going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the AI survey again. I know we said it was going to be closed, but it has actually been extended for another week. And as Chancellor Roberts said, like AI is a large concern of not only UNC Chapel Hill, but also of the state of our world. It is a part of every single major. And if it isn't yet, it will be. So please go ahead, take this survey, tell your constituents to take the survey. There is the incentive of winning 1 of 5 iPads. Last numbers I heard, there was about 3,000 people had taken the survey, which was more than people had actually voted for the GPSG president last year. So, but that number was only 400, so it wasn't very hard to beat. Okay, we're going to go to updates from committee chairs. Who would like to volunteer to go first? Otherwise, I will start calling names. Fernando, I saw your name, saw your hand first.
Fernando Quijano, business PhD. Travel awards, kind of as usual. You also like the update from the previous period. The December period is shaping up to be pretty quiet. Just because a lot of people will not apply it right now for travel in late December, early January, but we expect it to pick up significantly as we start the new year. So that's why a lot of our planning has been towards making sure that we have enough budget towards that. Yeah, that's pretty much our update. Continue to do the good work and getting money so people can travel and have impact.
Okay, Ben King, Public Administration, Chair of Oversight and Accountability. Not much is going on in our committee. We're sort of just meeting with executive folks, directors, and vice presidents, just to sort of get an update on what they're working on, what their goals are for next semester. I think we have one scheduled for our December meeting, and then we'll pick up back in January with some more, trying to get 2 or 3 per meeting. Probably going to reach out to the Board of Elections now, maybe get an update from them. But that's all I've got.
Questions? Nope. Okay, go ahead.
Margaret Hoke, Biostatistics Chair for RNJ. Last month, we talked about the FAIR Act with Senator King, and we had some other discussion about some legislation that did not end up, that ended up being withdrawn. And we discussed as well some proposed or like early stage amendments, or amendment isn't the right word, like kind of overhaul of the joint code coming from the undergraduate side. And kind of what that looks like and what that process will look like. And yeah, we haven't, we'll probably have a different monthly time for our regular meeting in the spring. And I will make sure that's on the Canvas calendar as soon as we've established when that will be.
Awesome, thank you. We have there is a question. All right. Cool. We'll give you the.
Yeah, so Finance Committee, we just had a change of leadership and also a couple of new members joined. So we are going to be working on implementing a new meeting time for the spring. But main things are, number one, as you probably all know, the deadline for town hall funding was extended to next year. And so you guys people who have units who have not applied yet can go ahead and apply. I will tell you that given the time of year, even if you are approved by the committee, you are unlikely to receive that funding from CUSO until next year. So just plan accordingly if for whatever reason you want to have your town hall in the next 2 weeks, which I doubt you do. But that being said, the other thing the Finance Committee is going to be doing soon is going to be deliberating the budget for next year. So if you have any thoughts or opinions on what you would like to see in the upcoming budget, please do reach out to me. I will be probably implementing some kind of more formalized process to collect feedback on that, but please reach out if you have any thoughts.
Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Are there any chairs online that would like to give their update next?
Yeah, I'm on.
Oh, sorry. Oh, Ellen, go ahead.
Okay. This is Ellen. I'm the SOGAP's chair. So this month we discussed the Wellness Day and accessibility resolutions that we just voted on. I also just want to mention some units have held a town hall but have not submitted their town hall report forms to me. So please submit these to me as soon as possible. I set a deadline and an email that I sent out of 8 p.m. at 7:59. So if you don't send those, then you won't get credit for holding your town hall and you won't get your fall allocations. So like I said earlier, I emailed those of you that this applies to, but just in case you're here and you didn't see my email, the units that have held a town hall but that haven't submitted their town hall report form are art, business administration, classics, and economics. So please submit that tonight if you can. If not, tomorrow should be okay. Thanks.
Sweet. And then for appropriations, we have allocated or awarded a little under $11,000 to 16 different events so far for the fall semester. And as we've started to get some of those reimbursement requests and post-event forms filled out, we've already started to recoup some of that money that was unspent by those events. So left in the budget to go forth for the spring semester is a little over $32,000. So I think we're doing pretty well.
Yep, that is all the committees. Thank y'all. I think we have one more vote coming in soon, but we already did town hall. I'm going to do my announcements. I'm going to keep it a lot shorter than last committee session, I promise. And so, as was spoken earlier by Katie, we really only had 2 business weeks since our last Senate meeting, so there's not been a lot of updates. I've been working with Board of Elections, and so I finally got a response from them, and that is great. I'm going to keep working with them as much as I can over the break. And finally, for allocations, that deadline is tonight, and so. Yes, so thank you everybody for all the chairs. Make sure you send me all the data that you possess on attendance and all that material. If you've already sent it to me, don't worry, I have it somewhere in my inbox. If I don't have it, I will reach out to you sometime next week after my exams are finished. So if you are wanting to utilize your allocations, I have 2 things. First, my question is why? Or especially like in between now and next in January, especially because there's not really we have like 1 more day of actual class, and so not a lot of building and bonding will be able to happen, especially with everybody cramming. So what I'm saying is I'm not going to be able to get all those numbers to you until our January Senate meeting, because I have my exams and all the number crunching that needs to happen is not going to happen until next week. So you might get it sooner than January 14th, which is our next Senate meeting, but January 14th is the deadline. Are there any questions?
And Marin linguistics, how are fall allocations that you're discussing calculating going to be affected by the town hall extension bill that we passed last time?
I believe that there will be an impact, and I cannot comment on how impacts will happen as I have not calculated the numbers yet.
All right, but there will be fall allocations calculated separately from spring allocations in
Yeah.
some form.
Yeah, I will make sure I follow the wording of the bill to calculate those allocations to make sure everything is above board and 100%.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I have the results of the votes, and it was somewhat close on one of them. All the rest passed, so the FAIR Act passed by 65%. And so does that need to be 2/3 or?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I don't recall right off the top of my head.
So other than the FAIR Act, everything passed by 90%. The FAIR Act passed by 65.11% so far. And so if that needs to be 2/3, there might be issues. But otherwise, are there any questions?
I have one more thing I'd say. Regarding questions to the chancellor, if anybody else has any other questions they'd like the chancellor to answer, I can't promise that he will. Put them in that form that we put up and I will we are gonna email them over all the questions that we have. So if there's something you would like put in there, I can't promise that I'll answer, we'll push on them too, but if there's something else you want in there, feel free to put it in the form. And we'll try and make sure we get it shipped out by end of the week. We'll ship it out. So this way it gives you guys some time if you want to ask additional questions.
We'll reach out to your constituents. I will try to get the broadcast of this submitted as soon as possible. It takes a while for Zoom to actually do its recordings. And so it's not going to happen tonight. So it may happen tomorrow, it may happen Thursday. But the recording should go up. But if you have any questions, please fill out the form. Please email me, email Nick. Don't email Katie right now. Let her do her oral in peace. And so after that, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Thank you all for coming. Yeah, I'm hoping there's no objections, but we finished the meeting at 8:06.
8:06.
Thank y'all, and there is pizza back there, so please take it.
Really sure. Oh wait, sorry. Will, can you hear me?
I mean, not that I'm like fearless right now. I just want to make sure I have.
Wait, sorry. Can people in the room hear me?
I
don't know if they can hear me.
Hey, Jacob, if you want, can you speak? I can still hear you in the room.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, I sure.
Oh, sorry. I must have ran to the bathroom when the voting opened, and so I forgot to vote, but I added it right before the meeting ended. I don't know if that changes. I voted yes for everything. I don't know if that changes the results for the FAIR Act.
Yeah, I don't know that it will. We'll take a look at it and we'll send out the final legislation and what the vote counts were, okay?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Appreciate you
No.
answering.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, well, thank you. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
Okay.